Hello? Hey, Father. You sent me a gift. I'm in the bathroom right now, so I can go... Bow, 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 bow. Bow, 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 bow. Bow, 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 bow. Bow, 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 bow. Hi. You may not know me, but my name is BABILA, and welcome to Things I Thought Of, a series where I talk about things that I thought of. This is looking like the longest episode that I put together so far, so if you're not already subscribed, you should do that. Turn on notifications and give this video a big ol' like. Yeah. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and I heard one of my favorite creators say something that really stuck with me. Let me see if I can find it. Here it is.
Real talk. I had a tactile memory response of how dope it felt to see these little boys go from falling off their bike over and over and over again into them riding a bike.
To you,
that shit
because
is
of you,
amazing.
you know?
Yeah, like I rode that boy off. He started pedaling, and all I could hear in the back of my head was, "You're breaking generational curses, my brother." Yeah. Like I was like, "Yeah, I am, nigga."
Generational curses. I knew what that meant, but I didn't understand what it meant. And then I was in therapy, and my therapist brought it up again. Then, here come the people on the Clock app.
I want to kill my mom. I want to kill my dad.
People talking about the concept of generational trauma. It was at that point where I was like, it's time. I need to understand this concept on a fundamental level. It's time to do research. Done. Okay, so I think the concept is pretty simple. It sounds like a scary phrase, generational trauma. And yes, the implications of it can be scary, but as a concept, it's not hard to understand. According to the Duke Office for Institutional Equality, generational trauma is a concept developed to help explain years of generational changes within family. It is the transmission of the oppressive or traumatic effects of a historical event. But I also want to highlight that as we get more into it, generational trauma isn't necessarily always tied to one specific event. It can also be due to societal pressures or cultural norms or other things. This is more a consequence of living under a certain circumstance. For example, according to a 1966 study done by the American Psychological Association, there were high levels of psychological distress amongst Holocaust survivors, but also their children. While not every generation goes through a situation as traumatic or intense as the Holocaust, different situations and standards have trickle-down effects onto multiple generations. But how do these things get passed down?
Hey, hold on, script. This feels a little premature. I mean, we've only talked about this in like a general sense. The homies in the audience don't have like a tangible or relatable example. Like, how are they going to have a good grasp on the concept if the only thing that we've given them is the Holocaust?
So, some examples, I guess. You walk into your parents' house for the first time in months. You're so excited to see your parents again after so long. You've missed your childhood bed, your dog, home-cooked meals, all of that stuff. You take a few steps into your house, and everyone realizes you're home. Your mom walks down and gives you a big hug. Then she pulls back to look at you and says, "Someone has been eating well while they've been away. You've gained weight." Now, how would a comment like this make you feel? Comment down below, because I definitely have thoughts. I even got you started with the pinned comment down below. Now, does your mom mean well when she makes a comment like this? I guess kind of. Not necessarily well, but I don't think that she necessarily meant to hurt you. In reality, though, you kind of brush it off and go to your room. You pass your bathroom mirror, and it's kind of like you do a double take. You look at yourself. Oof. Oof.
Oof.
That hurts, huh? But what even is that? What the hell is even that? Where does it come from? All you really know is that it made you feel bad and now you're uncomfortable in the skin that you're in. And the cause of it was your mother. It's an overall anxiety that you feel all across your body. And now you kind of just have to live with that for the rest of your life. But what about her? How does she feel about all of this? I know. Why should I care about the feelings of another person when they're the ones who hurt me? Well, the answer to that question is what's going to help us come to a better understanding. The unfortunate reality is that sometimes for things to be able to change, we have to do things that are uncomfortable and don't feel right, but it's what makes us the bigger person. Well, okay, let's think about where your mom's coming from. She most likely grew up in a patriarchal society where a lot of times women's bodies are seen as their only form of individual worth. So seeing you as an individual skew out of what society's definition of the ideal body looks like makes her feel anxious. It makes her feel anxious for her, makes her feel anxious for you. Her parents before you were around might have also been really, really negative about body image, further perpetuating what society standards are. You see what I'm talking about? After growing up in these kinds of conditions, this is what she knows. And that's how it makes it to you. Well, script, I guess that was a good idea to give an example. One of the most common ways that generational trauma comes up in consumable media like TV and movies is through the sins of the father trope. The sins of the father trope serves to categorize when a character has to deal with the mistakes or choices made by a parent. I say parent because even though the trope has a patriarchal background, there's a lot of situations where the person who ends up in that parental role doesn't end up being a man. It can be used in any situation where a child has to deal with the consequences of a parent's actions or treatment. This can be seen in many different examples, but the origin of the phrase is biblical. For you shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. But it's not just found biblically. These kinds of transfers of sin or exchanges of consequences are found in many different pieces of media across time. When humanity was cold and living amongst the beasts, the gods of Olympus looked down on the planet. Struggling and lacking even the Greek-era version of modern technology, the outlook for humanity was one of suffering. But one god, no, one titan sought to help them. Prometheus, the titan of fire, stole fire from the Olympians and gave it to humanity. And although it was Prometheus who had stolen the fire from the Olympians, Zeus punished humanity instead, sending Pandora and her box of horrors. In Fullmetal Alchemist, the Elric brothers had to fight the literal sins of the character father. Also, in Game of Thrones, Jon Snow is effectively treated as an outcast for most of the show, all due to his father's decisions. Since he's his father's bastard son, he's given the last name Snow, which is given to all those in Winterfell that are bastard children. The unequal treatment that Jon receives is a consequence of the unfaithfulness of his father. I don't think I had to spell out why this spells generational trauma for a lot of these examples. Some action or event has effects on an individual and subsequently their children. There are also other examples of this trope showing up in a lot of popular things like Attack on Titan, Spider-Man, Homecoming and Far From Home, Into the Woods, and other countless pieces of media. It seems like individual behaviors or interactions between a parent and their child are ways for these kinds of things to get passed down. But why is it that our parents do this to us in the first place? Why do the ones that we love cause us pain? Well, that last one isn't a question I can fully answer right now. But partially, society has been making a big shift towards people actually taking care of their mental health and stuff like that. You know, instead of just like shoving it down. In a generation where we feel like we're living through historical events every few days, millennials and Zoomers are taking a lot more proactive approach to taking care of themselves, seeking out therapy and preserving their mental health. Think about it. Amongst your peers, having conversations about mental health is probably a more common occurrence. I don't want to speak for everyone. Things just seem to be trending that way. We're trying to face things more head on, addressing the trauma that we experience. Do you know who doesn't do this? A lot of our parents. In the better cases, children may be growing up in homes where their parents haven't necessarily fully processed the pain that they've been through, so they might not have a full grasp on why certain behaviors have negative effects on you or others. In worst cases, though, a parent could be using you as a vent for their own pain. causing them to be neglectful, physically, or verbally abusive, which the example from before is an example of that. Yes, if that's a repeated behavior, that does count. All a product of some type of trauma that hasn't been dealt with yet. We have to remember that trauma is often not the fault of the person who's experiencing it. Maybe that individual walked into a situation where the trauma was just handed to them. Or maybe it's a consequence of epigenetics. What is epigenetics? Do I have the time in this video to comprehensively explain the concept? No. But there's room for simplification. Essentially, epigenetics is a study of how individual behaviors or environmental effects can change gene expression. Our DNA doesn't always express all of itself. Some portions are on and are being expressed, and some portions aren't. There are certain processes in our body that regulate how our genes are expressed. Let me make an example. The basic process of how things work in there is that DNA is the atlas, RNA is the map, proteins are the car, and expression is the destination. Your atlas is focused on certain countries, states, or provinces, not the whole world at the same time. Like, I have access to Texas, Djibouti, and Hong Kong. Epigenetics basically just takes time, environmental factors, and certain behaviors, and changes what countries you have access to. I can gain and lose access to certain places. So maybe I lose access to Hong Kong, but I gain access to Switzerland and Florida. Now, are these always going to be places that you want to go? No, clearly. You could gain access to the Bermuda Triangle, and then all of a sudden you're going there instead of Waffle House. There's also a chance that you can lose access to places, so you don't even have the chance to make it to a Waffle House. Okay, now we have a rudimentary understanding of how epigenetics work, right? Here's an example I got from the CDC. Smokers versus non-smokers versus former smokers. So, smoking is a behavior that can lead to epigenetic changes. The more you smoke, the more you affect your tumor suppressor genes. When your body doesn't have the ability to suppress unregulated cell growth, it causes tumors, and tumors lead to cancer. Non-smokers have proper access to their tumor suppressor genes, so they normally don't have to deal with this kind of issue. This is a perfect example of an epigenetic change because it's not like all of your DNA is being affected, it's just the access to certain portions that are really important. Now, like I said, behaviors and experiences have effects on your epigenetics. This extends to psychological behaviors as well. Going through traumatic events can have effects on your gene expression. In extreme examples, like mothers who were pregnant during 9/11, their babies were born with lower levels of cortisol, which is a consequence of PTSD. While scientists are still studying the ability to be able to transfer these kinds of epigenetic changes, it's been shown in some cases to happen. Trauma affects genetic processes, leading to traumatic reactivity being heightened in populations who experience a great deal of trauma. Oh, also, we all live in a culture, and we do be living in a society. Culture and society both provide us with a set of norms that we're supposed to follow.
Social and cultural norms are basic expectations or beliefs set by a specific social or cultural group.
While cultural norms can provide us with a beautiful framework on how we're supposed to live our lives, like bowing out of respect for somebody when you first meet them, some expectations can have heavily negative effects on the people living under them. Just like that first example that I gave. Your mother growing up in a patriarchal society where women's bodies are often policed and where weight gain is seen as like a detestable thing. So when she sees it happen to you, it heightens her anxieties about it, subsequently passing on those anxieties to you. To elaborate more, I want to talk about generational curses. Okay, so are there actual distinctions between the phrase generational curse and generational trauma? Probably, but in my mind, this is the way that I am separating these two things. The biggest thing being that most often when I hear the phrase generational curses, it's coming from groups that tend to be minorities. Just like how a traumatic event like the Holocaust continually affects the Jewish community, generations after its actual occurrence. There are other events that have similar effects on different communities. I'll talk about the Black community because of obvious reasons. For African Americans, there are a lot of ways the past still affects us. For example, there's a tendency for Black individuals to have more negative health outcomes in comparison to their white counterparts. This has like a bunch of reasons why it's like that. It's the way that medical documents have erroneously said that Black people have thicker skin, meaning that they have a higher pain tolerance, or the way that Black women don't have their voices heard in medical situations, leading to like withholding of medication and just general negligence. It's the way that the Tuskegee syphilis study had black people unknowingly inoculated with syphilis. Stuff like this has led to a generational and communal distrust of the medical community. Could this have a connection to overall poorer health outcomes? I don't actually know. But there is a common connection with general distrust of medical professionals within the community. It has a general negative effect even in situations where medical professionals are administering things ethically, like in the case of the COVID-19 vaccines. General distrust led to a lot of people not getting the help that they actually needed. And this is all without discussing the long-lasting... Man, my butt hurts. This is all without discussing the general negative effects that slavery has had on African Americans. General perceptions of inferiority, feeling as if you need to push your kids harder in order to feel like they're equal to their white peers. These are all things that are a reality for people who grow up living as an African American. So, why can't we seem to get past some of these things? In a lot of cases, the generation before us isn't ready to address a lot of the issues that they're dealing with. It's easy when your life has been one way for so long to kind of just get used to it. It often leads to us denying and minimalizing the seriousness of our own issues. It's not that big of a deal. My parents dealt with it too. That's just the way that it is. I'm fine. But one of the first revelations that I've made is that you don't have to live like this. The life that you're living right now, if you feel like you're struggling with the problems that have been handed to you, if you feel like you can't handle it, it doesn't have to be like this. And you know what? I'm saying this in a you can do it, buddy kind of way, not in a pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of way. Because like we talked about in the Rick and Morty bootstrap paradox video, that's an impossible thing to do. But also, you and your family didn't ask to deal with the issues that were handed to you. And hopefully, especially in the case of things that are systemic issues, one day things will change. And people won't have to deal with things like this. Steven Universe is an animated TV show that ran on Cartoon Network from the year 2013 to the year 2019, with an epilogue series that ran until 2020. Without spoiling too much, the show is about a boy named Steven who's born to a human father and a gem mother. Gems are another race of beings, don't worry about it. Essentially, throughout the series, Steven learns how to control his gem half and deals with a really powerful antagonist, the sins of the father trope. I won't go into too much detail about the rest of the storyline, but I remember in 2019 when the movie came out. I sat there with my takeout food with the blinds closed, the lights turned off, and my laptop open. I even remember the amount of hoops I had to jump through to be able to watch the movie as it was airing. If I remember it correctly, I watched it in parts illegally on YouTube before it got copyright claimed. Cozied up and watching the movie while breaking the law. I vividly remember one of the last scenes in the movie. Steven talks about what was able to make him strong throughout the entire series. The power to change. The song he sings goes like this. And yes, the movie is a musical. You can judge me later. I can make a promise. I can make a plan. I can make a difference. I can take a stand. I can make an effort if I only understand that I can make a change. You see, remember that CDC article I was talking about earlier? Smokers versus non-smokers versus former smokers, right? Well, I never talked about the former smokers part. Those epigenetic changes that come from smoking are reversible. When comparing the genes of smokers, non-smokers, and former smokers, the epigenetics of non-smokers and former smokers to a certain point can look almost identical. It's like they never smoked a day in their life because they decided to make a change. The choices, events, and actions experienced by your ancestors or your parents do not define you. You have the opportunity to be who you want to be. You could be the one who breaks the cycle. You could be the one who makes the change for your kids if you want them, for your family found or blood related, and most importantly, for yourself. It's up to you. But hey, that's just a thing that I thought of. Wait, also, a few things.
I also want to give a special thanks to the people who reached out to me when I asked if they could sit down and talk about if they had any generational trauma issues or family issues. Special shout out to Paige, Shri, Katie, Brittany, Lonnie, and everyone who is willing to help. Thanks.
If you liked this video, you should subscribe and also leave it a like. If you feel like you resonated with some of the topics that we talked about today, feel free to leave a comment down below. Also, I've been talking about a lot of heady topics, and I would like to talk about something different next time. So I promise the next video will be a little bit more fun. Okay, cool.